Hello, this is Henrik. Thanks for joining. People often ask me how I shoulder the workload that I have to tackle every day. Well, I think we all have our individual packages of things that we have to do. But I have to say, especially during this pandemic, what was a key insight for me is how I can balance my day. How can I do the less nice tasks and balance them out with the things that I really enjoy and that are exciting to me. Sometimes we have responsibilities, so balancing out my day is something that is very, very helpful for me. And I have many opportunities to learn. I have many people with whom I exchange. I learn from many different perspectives. But of course, what I'm saying here is my own personal experience, and it might give other people value, but I don't know if it's helpful for everyone. Still, I felt like sharing, and maybe it helps you to balance your day out. So, the first thing, most important thing, I think, is regular sleep. I typically go to bed at midnight and I wake up at around 7 right now. If the kids go to school, and right now they don't, then I would probably wake up at 6:30. It's Still, I think I would go to bed at around midnight. Having a solid amount of sleep, and especially the right window of sleep, is for me very, very important. I think that's something that I misjudged in the past, and now I recognize it became more important for me. I don't have trouble falling asleep, but I sometimes enjoy to wind the day a little bit down. And what I then, for instance, do is I listen to an audiobook or a podcast. What I also like, and what's very important, what I especially learned during this pandemic, but what I do already now since a decade, is taking power naps. These 10 minutes in between are sometimes a real game changer for me, and I can fall asleep within 2 minutes, so I'm very lucky to this end. But for me, it's super important every now and then to take a break. And sometimes, even like when the day ended around 6 o'clock, I take sometimes up to 20 minutes of a nap, which then gives me enough energy to make it through the evening. Yoga is really important for me. I really like doing a few minutes of yoga in the morning. Sometimes I do longer stretches in the evening. Doing Tai Chi in the garden, also while traveling before the pandemic, was a real game changer for me. And what I do every now and then, probably should do it more often, is some cardio and some weightlifting. I feel sports is a really personal thing. Every person has their preference. But for me, having sometimes this high intensity cardio burst in between is something that is quite helpful. Meditation is really key to me. Having a repertoire of meditation that I built over the last few decades is something that I come back to and that I revisit every now and then. Now there are a lot of apps. In the past there were also a lot of audiobooks, and I think there's really many exciting tools there out that many people can use that are really giving a lot of people value and that are extremely helpful. I can say for myself, meditation helps me to understand me better. It helps me to understand other people better, and in terms of balancing out my day, meditation is really essential, because especially before I have a difficult meeting where maybe people don't act in a way that I would prefer, then doing some meditation beforehand, maybe also after, and helps me to bring some context to people's actions. So that is something that gives me a lot of value, and I think without meditation I wouldn't be where I am now. Exchange with people is what we are missing during this pandemic. Still having some exchange with people, even if it's via Zoom. Having a coffee or a tea break every now and then is really essential. There's nothing better for me than like 10 minutes of a total wind down, going to my coffee machine, making a quick coffee. I think this is incredibly helpful, and I really look forward in getting back into this with my team, with colleagues from university, because there's nothing nicer than making an AeroPress coffee for a colleague and explaining them what I'm actually doing there. What completely changed my balancing system over the day was setting a timer and trying to do the Pomodoro technique. So sometimes I just try to get myself into a task and try to finish it. And what also changed the whole game was setting appointments with myself in my calendar where I want to tackle certain tasks. Often I'm quite generous to this end, because nothing's worse than if you don't finish a task that is ugly. So I try to make the tasks, the calendar sets, a little bit longer. And if I'm then done earlier, I can give myself a treat and maybe have a coffee. I try to alternate over my day tasks that are dull versus tasks that are exciting, and the tasks that I have to do and the ones I want to do. This is basically my own personal Eisenhower matrix, and I always try to get things into what is dull, what is exciting, and what are the things that I want to do and the things I don't want to do. So that's something that for me is really, really helpful, and getting through these different directions of like where I think these are the things that I want to do, these are things that I don't want to do, these are the things I have to do. Maybe this is something that is extremely helpful to balance it out, because what I often do is if I have some sort of a mediocre task that isn't horrible in itself but isn't also all exciting, then I try to locate it before a task that is super nice and after a task that is really super ugly, because the mediocre task gets kind of like way better if it's following a task that was really not so nice. So this is how I balance things out, that I think this is at the heart of my balancing my day, that I really try to orchestrate some sort of structure where I have nicer tasks, where I have not so nice tasks, and then I try to build a coherent logic. I am a creature of habits, and what I do early in the morning when I'm sitting in my bed or when I'm already at the breakfast table, I look at the day and I try to balance out the day. I see to locate, where do I locate maybe a short coffee break, where do I do a power nap, or where can I get exciting tasks in that energize me and that give me a little bit of a flow. So this is how I design the whole thing, and that's very, very important for me. And what has become essential to this end is to change location every now and then. I have certain locations that are associated with certain tasks. So for instance, I'm sitting at the kitchen table sometimes with my Bose headphones, and then I'm definitely focusing on one task and typing, and I won't stop until I'm done. Often at this point in the background, I have Philip Glass. I'm completely addicted to Philip Glass soundtracks. I think it's super mesmerizing to me, and I listen also to certain apps that gives you ambient sounds, but I hope summer is coming soon, and then I will go into the garden, and there I do the same thing. Sometimes I'm sitting for half an hour and just typing away and changing locations every now and then. For people who don't have a garden, maybe going to the park and sitting there for half an hour and just writing one thing is extremely helpful for me. So I have specific locations and I go there, and often they are associated with a specific flavor of music or ambient sounds that get me into the flow of working. What's super important is to spin the day towards rewards, especially when I have a hard day. I look forward in the evening to maybe prepare some food, maybe spend some family time, or maybe doing some sports. So that is something that is super exciting for me. And what I like the most is that in the early hours of the evening, I sometimes do gardening, and then I try to tackle some telephone calls that I still have. And then the telephone calls are suddenly way more fun because I can combine them with the gardening. And what I also do is I love reading philosophy, and I really look forward of having more time to read philosophy in the evening and to really plan this out and get a more systematic overview. So this is often like a reward system, and when I had especially tasks where I'm not all happy with, sometimes I give myself a treat and I read for 15 minutes afterwards. The basic structure of my day is in 50-minute blocks, and often this accumulates to half an hour or to 1 hour, but I always think in 50 minutes blocks because this is the attention span I think that we can have. And afterwards I would need some sort of a rewinding, or I go into a passive mode where I'm in a meeting where I'm more listening. If you need to push sometimes for several hours, that's typically normal, but if, like me, you need to be often active, you're often leading the meetings that you're in, then I know, okay, if I have like a 2-hour lecture that I'm teaching, then afterwards I need to wind down a little bit and maybe I want to have an espresso. So, and that's something how I try to balance things out, how I try to build some equilibrium over the day, and in the morning I try to plan this out to have some expectation management, and then in the evening I sometimes come back to it and revisit it and try to see how I feel, try to balance it out with reading, with sports, and then ultimately plan the next day accordingly, because if sometimes it's a little bit over the line, you need to adapt. And this is what I learned from balancing my day, and I will, I guess, keep improving that until the end of my days. Learning to compose this narrative of how I balance my day took me several years, and I look forward to continue to learn to this end. I think this is a process that is ongoing, but I feel I have learned a lot, and now I feel I'm really in a balanced place. Thank you for listening.